Number 8. Real-life Catwoman. On November 6, 2018, 22-year-old Monique Agostino and her gang of teenage hooligans broke into a Sydney pizzeria with a chisel, the latest in a series of burglaries she had committed that year. At first glance, Agostino appeared to be a highly successful young woman. She was a licensed real estate agent and even started her own clothing line the previous year. On top of that, she had a budding career as an Instagram model, often posing as Batman's complicated love interest Catwoman. Unfortunately, everything went downhill when she lost her real estate license. She apparently started using narcotics to deal with the stress, and according to reports, she convinced a few teenagers to help her burglarize shops across the North Shore in Sydney. Her crimes were relatively minor, such as stealing $1,000 from a local bakery, $300 from a cafe, and swiping a $90 jacket. However, she was eventually caught with illegal substances and a knife while shopping at Target. The narcotics alone were enough to bring her down, and Australia's strict knife laws made things worse. What's more, her burglary at the pizzeria was caught on tape, and even though she and her collaborators wore black masks, authorities were able to put the pieces together. She was arrested in November, and she was sentenced to 2 years in jail. Agostino appealed her sentence, and she managed to get out on bail after serving half her sentence. Just months after her release, she got arrested again for possession of a knife and narcotics, serving another brief stint in the Silverwater Women's Correctional Center. And in 2020, she got away with a fine after stolen property was found in her home. By 2023, Agostino had racked up a whopping 33 convictions, making it impossible for her to become a realtor again. She continued dabbling in narcotics, and on May 26, 2023, news media reported that she had been sentenced to yet another 9 months in jail. She will be up for parole before the end of the year, and there's no telling what she'll get up to next. Number 7. Darth Vader robs a bank. At 11:30 a.m. on July 22, 2010, depositors at a Long Island bank chuckled when they saw a man dressed as Darth Vader walk in. However, their laughter soon turned to screams as the perpetrator shoved a man to the ground before pulling out a semi-automatic handgun. The initial humor of the situation prompted some to quip that he might take out his lightsaber, but the presence of an actual lethal weapon brought a deathly silence to the proceedings. The costumed robber, who even wore the iconic cape from the Star Wars franchise, was not there to joke around. Towering over the bank teller at 6'2", the culprit truly seemed like Darth Vader came to life. His intimidating voice boomed around the building as he demanded the bank teller to hand over the cash, and as soon as the shaking employee gave him what he wanted, he fled through the east parking lot without another word. Despite being caught on camera, the culprit was smart enough to keep his helmet on. As a result, police had absolutely no leads to work with, and he remains at large to this very day. Number 6. Beware the Unicorn. At 5 a.m. on March 16, 2019, a unicorn walked into a store. While this might sound like the start of some dreadful joke, the unicorn in question was actually 28-year-old Jacob William Rogg, wearing a costume to conceal his identity. He had violent intentions that night, and he did not want anyone finding out who he was. The owner of High's Dairy Convenience Store, a longtime Baltimore resident, might have been amused at the man in the funny white and pink costume, but he felt a rush of fear when he noticed the crowbar in his hands. Jacob used the crowbar to crack open the cash register, grabbing as much money as he could, and even stealing a few boxes of cigarettes for good measure. Once the deed was done, Jacob tore off his costume and ran towards a silver Hyundai Elantra that would serve as his getaway vehicle. In the car, 27-year-old Joseph Phillips Fezesa was lying in wait and put the pedal to the metal as soon as his partner in crime got in. However, the rush of adrenaline led to some reckless driving by Joseph, who veered into oncoming traffic. The getaway driver swerved to avoid these cars, but ended up hitting a series of other objects instead. Joseph was driving so fast that the car ran through several mailboxes, an electricity pole, and even a boulder, before a tree finally brought it to a stop. Needless to say, both culprits sustained heavy injuries, and they were apprehended by police shortly after. As the main culprit, Jacob was charged with first-degree assault and destruction of property, and both men were denied bail pending their trial. Number 5. The Punisher's innocent victim. At approximately 5:30 p.m. on February 17, 2021, 21-year-old Connor Deegan brutally slashed 18-year-old Amber Raven across her neck and stomach and then left her for dead. The culprit, who frequently dressed up as his favorite Marvel anti-hero, the Punisher, had been obsessed with Raven ever since they met in 2019. According to the victim's statements to the press, her assailant told her he loved her just days after they met. Disturbed by his advances, Raven told him to stop contacting her, but this did not stop the troubled man from inserting himself into her life. On the day of the incident, the victim and her soon-to-be attacker were reportedly hanging out with some friends at Ilford Park, London. Deegan, showing no regard for personal boundaries, kept caressing her hair and hugging her, despite her obvious discomfort. Raven eventually decided to leave, but the culprit insisted on walking her to the train station. Knowing he would follow her anyway, the victim reluctantly agreed, but as they approached the park gates, he put her into a chokehold and dragged her into a nearby public bathroom. Once inside, he began hacking away at her body, and the victim only survived by playing dead. Thinking he had finished the job, the culprit washed his knife and left, but his clothes were still drenched in Raven's blood. According to witnesses that saw him after the attack, Deegan claimed he was acting just like the Punisher. In May 2021, Deegan was sentenced to 9 years and 4 months in prison. Though his victim survived the attack, she had to undergo 11 hours of surgery, and the trauma of the ordeal will linger for many years to come. Number 4. The Joker runs amok in Tokyo. At 8 p.m. on October 31st, 2021, Batman's arch-nemesis, the Joker, stabbed 17 people on a train traveling to Kokuryo Station in Tokyo. The culprit was actually 24-year-old Kayota Hatiro, who became violent after facing problems at work. Commuters on the Kyo Railway expected the day to unfold like any other, and when Hatiro entered the train wearing a Joker costume, they assumed he was just celebrating Halloween. However, shortly after the train departed, the culprit nearly blinded a man seated beside him with pesticide before driving a knife through his chest. The assailant managed to stab 16 more people in a vicious frenzy before the frantic commuters decided to pull the emergency release handle. This brought the train to a halt approximately 10 feet away from Kokuryo Station, and passengers began rushing out through half-open doors and windows. When he realized the train had stopped, the culprit took his violence to another level by setting fire to the compartment, and he was quickly arrested after he exited the train. During his interrogation, he revealed his personal life had been spiraling out of control since June. He also stated that the Tokyo stabbings of August 2021 inspired him to commit his brutal act, and he was hoping to kill at least 2 people to secure the death penalty. Fortunately, all of his victims survived their wounds. On July 31st, 2023, the homicidal Hattori was sentenced to 23 years behind bars for the attempted murder and arson. Do you think this culprit got off easy? Let us know in the comments and hit subscribe while you're at it. Number 3. Cosplay model turned criminal. On October 17, 2019, 26-year-old Melissa Turner stabbed and killed her boyfriend, 25-year-old Matthew Trussler, after a night of drinking. The killer was a well-known cosplay model at the time, and on the day of the incident, she and her boyfriend enjoyed a relatively normal afternoon. After feeding their pets, buying some groceries at Publix, and making a trip to Home Depot, the couple returned to their home in Tampa, Florida, where they had lunch together. The next day, police received a call from a distraught Turner, who told them that her boyfriend was lying dead in the swimming pool. His corpse was pale, and gallons of his blood had turned the water red. Police arrived at the crime scene, where they found Turner's body covered with knife wounds. Later autopsy reports revealed a massive gash across his chest, as well as deep lacerations on his neck, which suggested the victim was trying to run away from his assailant. He also had a minor knife wound on his shoulder, potentially the first of many cuts he had eventually received, since the killer's violence escalated over the course of the encounter. The most notable finding from the autopsy was a large defensive wound across the victim's arm, indicating that the attack began from the front and that he tried to protect himself before attempting to escape. Authorities cordoned off the crime scene and took Turner in for questioning. She admitted to consuming alcohol the previous night, getting so intoxicated that she passed out, and she only discovered her boyfriend's body when she woke up. Little did she know, one of the lead investigators, Detective Ryan Lagasse, had already noticed a neighbor's security camera pointed directly at the crime scene and was watching the surveillance footage the whole time. The video was grainy, but Lagasse could clearly hear an argument breaking out between the victim and his suspected killer. And at one point, a female voice could clearly be heard saying, "You effing die." When interrogators revealed the video evidence, Turner completely changed her tune. According to her, Trussler woke her up in the middle of the night while she was still drunk, and his aggressive behavior escalated until he held a knife up to her face. Fearing for her life, Turner claimed she pried the weapon from his hands and used it against him in self-defense. The killer had a cut on her hand, which she claimed was unrelated to the incident. However, the police concluded she received it during the stabbing, possibly due to the knife slipping out of her hand. The absence of defensive wounds coupled with the cut on her hand led to the police arresting Turner for second-degree murder. Her trial finally began on February 14, 2022, and the jury declared her guilty 4 days later. On March 18th, Turner was sentenced to 20 years in Florida State Prison. Number 2. The Thieving Teletubby. At 2 a.m. on October 26, 2014, 20-year-old Therese Owens, a student at Lehigh University in Pennsylvania, put on a yellow Teletubby costume and broke into his friend's home. Dressed as the character Lala from the popular children's show, Owens, who is a rather large person, looked absolutely terrifying in the outfit. A former football player, the perpetrator stands at an impressive 6'2" and weighs approximately 310 pounds. Watching the massive Teletubby bust down the door would have made any witness question their grip on reality. Once inside, the culprit made a beeline for the fridge and went for the one thing he was craving: Chinese food. He stuffed as much as he could into his man purse, spilling much of it on the floor in the process, and left without touching anything else. Shortly before the break-in, he had posted on Instagram saying how desperate he was for some General Tso's. When his friend found out what had happened, he initially refused to file a police report. The perpetrator had a history of run-ins with the law, including a citation for purchasing alcohol as a minor, and his friend did not want to add to his troubles. However, the landlord was determined to hold Owens accountable. When the police arrived to arrest him, the culprit was found still wearing the Teletubby costume, and the chief of police, Mark DeLuzio, remarked that this was perhaps the strangest non-violent case he had ever seen. Based on the latest available information, Owens was charged with disorderly conduct and criminal mischief, which likely put his future at Lehigh University in jeopardy. Number 1. Break-in by the anime robot. A massive fan of the anime Neon Genesis Evangelion, Fujisawa was reportedly wearing a mech suit inspired by the series during the burglary, and he had traveled approximately 15 miles from his home in Izuka to enact his plan. Oddly enough, it was later discovered that he was wearing women's clothing underneath, including a one-piece bathing suit and a pair of black tights. The burglar managed to steal around 17,000 yen, approximately $150 at the time, and the crime was likely premeditated since he chose his target carefully. The home belonged to a 60-year-old woman who lived alone, so the culprit was looking for a victim that could not put up a fight. Additionally, he may have been watching the home and laying in wait for hours, since he entered the premises only after the elderly resident had left. This was not the first time he tried to commit crime in a costume, nor was it the last. He had previously worn a bunny girl costume as well as a Spider-Man outfit during his previous heists, and 10 days after the Munakata break-in, the burglar was finally apprehended while trying to burglarize yet another home. Fujisawa had served time in prison before, and eventually he was connected to at least 9 other burglaries that involved the same costumes. In his own words, he felt compelled to steal whenever he put on a costume. In the end, he received a relatively light sentence of 3 years penal labor on May 13th, 3 months after his final crime. The judge stated that his behavior was the result of addiction and felt that hard labor might set him straight. Which of these cosplaying criminals surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Bad Badger.